again, thanks to Carlin. So just to welcome everybody today to the AHECS Lunch and Learn. And we're delighted to, I suppose, to bring today's conversation, which is early careers, taking a look at the now and the next. And to say Sinead Darcy, who's no stranger to us and a very loyal friend to AHECS over the year, is now, I suppose, starting her new career as founder and strategist with Future Roots. And today's session is, I suppose, giving you a little bit of introduction to it. As the world of work continues to evolve and change, companies are increasingly reassessing their early career programs to ensure they're the best fit for the company need and for the evolving needs of the talent they're aiming to attract to hire. So today, Sinead will look at the current global early career landscape and give first-hand, I suppose, insights from students, graduates and employers from a domestic perspective to give a sense of the overall challenges and opportunities in this space. So I'll now hand you over to Sinead. Thank you very much. There is an opportunity for people to put in if they have any questions in the chat, but at the end then, if you want to come on camera, we'd welcome you as well. So I'll now hand you over to Sinead, and thanks a million.
Thanks a million, Angela, and good to be here with you all. So some of you I would have met many times on campus over the years, and some of you I could be very new to. So I'll introduce myself in a sec, and I'll start sharing my deck. But I suppose the first thing that I wanted to do was get a show of hands, and it's okay. I see cameras are off for a lot of people. If you could just do it virtually with a thumbs up or a smiley face or a sad face. I want to get a sense of where you think things are at in students' mindsets, because what I'm going to give you today is an insight into the work I do with students, graduates and employers. So I work with all three stakeholders in different guises. But I want to get from yourselves, because you're working with students directly, a sense of, before we begin, students' mindset in terms of their opinion of the world of work. So are they worried? Are they concerned? Are they happy? Are they sad? So a happy face if you think they have a very positive mindset at the moment, or a thumbs up, whichever you prefer, or a sad face or a thumbs down if you think, well, actually, you're talking to students and they're very worried and concerned about getting a job after they graduate. So I see some thumbs up, which are good. Oh, I see some shocked faces. Okay, so not everybody's happy. So mostly thumbs up is what I'm seeing, and some shocked faces, a couple of sad faces as well. And it's actually good to see a bit of a mix, that you're not all, because at a time of full employment, you would presume that maybe in Ireland domestically, you would think that, students are very positive on the outlook for the jobs market, very positive about getting a job when they actually finish college. But we just did some research, I say we in Future Roots, and I'll introduce Future Roots now in a second as well. I'm partnering with another agency called Harvest, and we're about to launch some research in the early career space in November. And in our research, 37%, which I was really shocked at, 37% of students are not optimistic about getting a job post qualification. And we'll talk about that. But, as more of your emojis come in the chat or on screen, I'm probably seeing that, it's more the sad faces, the worried faces, the concerned faces that are coming up more than the thumbs up and the smiles. And that very much aligns with what I've been experiencing over the last few months working with students. And then on the flip side, working with employers, they cannot get enough talent. So, they don't understand how they can't get the talent in the door. But anyways, we'll talk about that today. So it's very interesting to see that your opinions and your feelings and your experience of working with students is very much aligned with the sample that we researched over this summer, which I'll touch on as well. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, which means I won't be able to see your screens, unfortunately. But yeah, my name is Sinead Darcy. I've worked in the space of early careers for 20 years now. So I remember Mary Sweeney, who was in UL. I'm sure a lot of you would remember Mary. She was probably one of my first mentors in this space. I remember reaching out to her, 20 years ago now, when I began working with AHECS. So I set up their graduate program many years ago, and very proud to see that still running today. And I remember reaching out to Mary, and her passion for students, for talent, and for matching graduates with employers was just, I suppose, very inspiring. And it inspired me to think of, well, I wonder, could I maybe make a career out of this? And I definitely didn't think that 20 years later, I'd be making a career out of it to the point where I would have my own company in this space. But what I'll say to you is right now, there is a lot of activity, as I'm sure you're aware of, because you work in this space too. In the early talent space, it's a very positive space. Employers are looking to innovate in this space across the whole spectrum, which we'll talk about today, of the employee experience. But on the flip side, we have students, so those feeding into this system, who have a very negative and worried and concerned view on where things are at. So there's a mismatch somewhere. And some of you would have been either online or present at the Grad Ireland breakfast over the summer, where I spoke, and I did mention that mismatch at that time. So after today, if you'd like to connect with Future Roots or with myself, please do so on LinkedIn. But today we're going to talk about the now and the next for early careers, because like I said, it's a very, very interesting space at the moment. So first of all, Future Roots. So I established Future Roots literally in kind of, I suppose, April, May of this year, after working for 20 years in the corporate space across telecoms, banking, and most recently FMCG. So for those of you who don't know me or haven't met me before, I spent the last 12 years very happily leading the Jameson International Brand Ambassador or Graduate Programme for Irish distillers. And for 10 of those years, we were number one in our space, number one FMCG graduate employer of choice. So I learned an awful lot there. I learned a lot in telecoms and in banking and setting up internships, apprenticeships, school leaver programs, and then graduate programs. So at Future Roots, we believe people are the roots, especially young talent, are the roots from which future business success grows. We do two things. So we look at the strategy design. So if you come to me as an employer who's never had an early careers offering before, as a startup or at any stage in your growth as a business, then Future Roots can help you develop the strategy behind your early careers offering, be that an apprenticeship, an internship, or a graduate program. And then, you know, some employers, and this is actually the bulk of my work since beginning back in May, the bulk of the work is actually, you know, employers who have an early careers or an early talent offering in apprenticeship, internship, or graduate program. And they're saying, we have it, but it's not working. And I don't know why. So can you help? So existing early careers offerings, then of course we look at those and partner with employers, and that's where the bulk of our business is currently. So what Future Roots does, to give you context before we go into the research we've been doing and the insights into the space that we work in, so we support across the full 360 employee experience. So when you think of an employee, and we're particularly talking about early talent here now, there's basically 6 steps. You attract them, you recruit them, you onboard them, you look at continuous development, you obviously want to retain them, one of the biggest challenges for employers currently, and you want to transition them or offboard them. And when I work with employers, you know, some of them have never heard of the term offboarding and get a little bit afraid when I talk about offboarding, because they think about retention and think, oh, we don't want them to leave, we want them to stay. But that's not what offboarding is about. Offboarding is every graduate program or early careers program will come to a natural end. So it's about transitioning from the program, reflecting on what you've learned during your time on the program, and packaging that up into how you bring it forward, either for an internal interview to stay within the business, or the reality is there won't always be jobs, so an external interview, and that's what it's for. So if any employers are chatting to you about any of these stages where they're having difficulty, then you can connect them with myself and Future Roots. But they're the aspects that we do. So as I said earlier, we did some research that will be actually, my next call today is finalising the research and packaging it up so we can start to share it publicly in November. And that was with a company called Harvest. I've worked with Harvest for a number of years as a judge with the Learning and Development Institute. They have the Pierce Walsh Award each year. And I was fortunate enough to win the award when I worked with Irish distillers, and since then have at different periods been a judge on the award, which is always a joy to do. So what we did was we partnered, because we both have a passion for early careers. So we wanted to look at, well, what's happening with the student mindset around this space. So we looked at a sample size of 50. We did a focus group with 18 students, and they were all in their final year of study, or in their undergrad or their final year of their masters. So basically they were going out into the world of work very soon. We then looked at the employers themselves. We had 12 employers across different sectors, and we surveyed them and also did focus groups with them. So it was both qual and quant approach to the study. The study was done over the months of June and July. So in the summer, it was very hard to get people, but we did okay. And then we talked to the graduates. They were the graduates of the employers. So sometimes we had multiple graduates that attended from employers, and they had been in employment for over a year. So again, had, you know, good experience working with employers. They weren't just straight in the door. And of course, then we match that with what's happening in the marketplace, which we'll talk about today. What's happening out there, what research is happening. And I actually have listed at the end of this presentation, in case I forget to mention today, it'll be in the deck for you, some of those sources that you can go and actually reference. They're absolutely brilliant. There's great research in the space at the moment, both globally and domestically, which I'll refer to today. So Angela mentioned what's on the agenda for today. We'll only be chatting for, you know, about 35 minutes, let's say. So you'll definitely be gone by 2 o'clock. We look at the context of change. This won't be new news for you. But I'm hoping that it might bring together or marry some of the multiple other sources and presentations and talks that you, I'm sure, have been to. We'll talk constantly about the expectations and the changing expectations of the student, the graduate, and the employer, because I work across the three. I lecture students, I deliver executive programs to graduates, and of course then work on the strategic development with employers. And then what's happening next? So, you know, what's in store for us? And there's a lot of change happening in this space. It's very exciting. I'm going to touch on some of that change today, but I was saying to Angela before you guys joined, I'm actually going to be presenting at the next Grad Ireland event in November. I think it's the 26th of November, so towards the end of November is the next event, and that will be focused on 2025, what's next in the space of early careers. So I'm hoping today will be a preview, and then I can build on it when we meet again, because I know a lot of you attend those Grad Ireland events in November. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of what we're going to cover together today. So the first thing that I would ask for you to pop in the chat there is, you know, what do you think are the biggest challenges companies? So you told me about students, and there's a little bit of concern about the jobs market. That's backed up by our research. Now let's look at companies. What do you think are the biggest challenges facing companies, so employers at the moment? If you can pop that in the chat, that would be great. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see the chat and see what pops up there. So you're constantly speaking with employers. I love some of the faces you've put, the emojis in the chat. Some students are very angry about the state of the market. That's okay. I get that. So we're seeing, you know, keeping talent, retention is the top problem. So Rebecca, you mentioned that it's the top problem. Of course, cost of living crisis, we're all feeling it. Retention is coming up again and again, and that's what the research is saying. But of course, on the flip side, to retain talent, you have to attract them. You have to get them in the door. And a lot of employers are finding that very difficult at the moment. And what they're not understanding is the student mindset. And what you guys have already told us is the student mindset is very negative towards employment. If we layer on that in the research that we did with 50 students this summer, students see that if they go on to do their masters, and I'm sure you guys are feeling this too, that they're more employable. But actually, when you talk to employers, that's not the case. So there's a mismatch in terms of what students think employers want and what employers actually want. What employers actually want more and more, and of course, you're very aware of the skills agenda and skills first, which we'll talk about in a moment as well. Employers want you to have been part of societies in college and show that you can actually show initiative outside of getting good grades in college. That's what they want. A lot of employers are actually talking at the moment, even outside of skills, to personality. Now, we always have had personality tests as part of the recruitment process, but it's more so, you know, are you friendly? How do you assess that in assessment centres? How do you actually give people feedback on that at assessment centres, or interviews, or whatever it is you have? So a lot of this is coming up around skills, but personality is really, really shining through, and what kind of personality is coming through, and not personalities that tend to come up in psychometrics, for example. So it's a very interesting and very grey space at the moment. Cost of relocation, the process, they have a lot of hurdles, absolutely, Orla, as you've said, to go through. The psychometrics, not hearing back from employers. Am I going to get a no? Am I going to get a yes? Time between when you get the yes and preparing for your first assessment can be very short window as well, after actually a long wait from application to hearing about that. So look, there's a lot of stuff happening from an employer's perspective in this marketplace, but also a lot happening for the graduates and the students themselves. And I like, Mark, you put in there about effective communication with students and recent graduates. One of the massive things that came out of our research, and it's no shock to yourselves, who I'm sure are hearing this from students all the time, is the clarity and communication. Students are not getting it from employers. Graduates, when they're in the door, are not getting it from employers. And employers are getting increasingly frustrated because of the demands the students and graduates are putting on them for further clarity and for clear communication. And what's happening from an employer perspective, if we look at their lens, is they have less people. Their teams are reducing in size. What we're finding is their budgets are not reducing, but their team size is reducing. So budgets to work on projects, to bring in external people like myself, consultants, those budgets are not decreasing, but the headcount they have in their company is. So while students and graduates are saying, I want more clarity, I want more communication, the employer is squeezed because they don't have the resource to get back quick enough. So anyways, I'll go back to the slides because it's a very, very interesting space, and I love all the insights you've shared there. So let's have a look at what the research is telling us in this space. So when we look at anything, context is always king. Okay, so you guys know this better than anyone else, because you're very aware of the jobs market, student mindset, etc. So we have a change in context, and actually it's funny, we were chatting about some of this, before you guys joined the call, but you mentioned a lot of it yourselves. There's an era of, there was a global recession that we all came out of. There was climate change. The pandemic then came and hit us. Once we had money in our pockets again, then suddenly the pandemic hit. Now that has led to a housing shortage because of, socio political unrest, cost of living crisis you guys mentioned. From a business perspective, there's competition, huge competition around finance now. For the first time, when we did the research this summer, there's a lot of interesting things, but for the first time, I have seen companies literally poaching graduates from competitors. I've never seen that before. You see that, the more senior you go in organizations, it happens, headhunting happens a lot. But at graduate level now, people just are spending a lot of money trying to get people in the door, and within a couple of months, someone else is coming and poaching them. And that's becoming a huge problem. And of course, that's part of the retention problem. The market is very tight and very competitive for talent, hence the poaching and the headhunting. The speed of technological transformation is, a shock to us all. Not so much Gen Z or the graduates, but to companies. And of course, there's a changing way of working and changing work models. Again, for the new generation going into work, that's not a change for them. They've never known what work models were like before COVID, whereas we did. So for them, this is just normal. And I think a lot of employers need to get their heads around it, the fact that students are not finding this weird. They're finding it normal, because it's the only way of work that they know, because they have never been in the world of work that was pre-COVID. But we're going to chat about that now in a sec. So basically what we're finding when we look at global research, global trends, and also what we researched this summer, was employers need to focus on a wider set of EVP criteria, so employee value proposition, to attract and retain talent. And they're not understanding that. And they're not understanding that because typically they don't have the resource to spend the time thinking about it. And again, that's where I thankfully come in. So what is the context then around Gen Z? Well, Gen Z, and we'll talk about that term, because some of you are probably out there going, oh, what about that term? Because I heard a few of you say it after the Grad Ireland breakfast. So we'll address the use of the term in a moment, which is quite interesting, where that change or mindset about the term has come from. It's actually from the US. So there's a growing state of, perma crisis, and I love that word for Gen Z. for all the reasons we've just talked about. But what's the so what from an employer perspective, or for yourselves, you know, talking to students and graduates? Well, if we look at an era of global recession, we're not in recession right now, thankfully, but these guys, this generation, were born during a recession. And they remember the struggle of that. They're only small, but they remember the struggle of it. So there is a hangover from that. Climate change. So this generation want to be engaged in social causes. That's no surprise. That's been around a long time. They are the Greta Thunberg generation. You know, sometimes we forget that. And they're looking for ways to make a tangible impact. So from an employer perspective, the so what is, of course, they're attracted to employers who care about the world they operate in. But one of the interesting things that came out in our research this summer was, that's not the primary thing that attracts them to an employer. They just expect the employer is going to have sustainable ways of working and give back to the community in which they operate. So it's not actually a primary driver for them anymore, whereas pre-COVID it probably was. And it was a lot of what you would see in the attraction material, the social content for employers. But that's changing in terms of what graduates are attracted to. The pandemic, of course, had a profound impact on this generation. That's not new news. At a very formative period of their development. And for myself, who was hiring and working directly with graduates before, during, and after the pandemic, you know, I really feel for those, probably a pocket there of 2 years from 21 to 23, where I feel for that particular generation. And I'd love to actually follow their careers. And that's, you know, something I will be doing, to see how that grows and develops versus those who are graduating in 24, for example, or those who graduated in 2019. So for me, there was a very clear change in personality, ability, attitude, outlook, in particular for those who graduated in those 2 years. And that's just from a practical sense. So basically, the pandemic was very isolating for them. And now what they want from an employer is they crave connection. And of course, are they getting that connection in the workplace in a hybrid context? Let's talk about that. So the housing shortage, of course, that hybrid and remote working models suit them for practical reasons. You guys said that in the chat yourselves, and for financial reasons. They cannot afford to maybe live in the city in which they work. So therefore, it suits them to not have to come to the office, 5 days a week. So we talk a lot about, hybrid work, remote work, that's just not going to work. We see a lot of employers, especially in the tech space, going back to 4 days a week, you must be in the office. But in actual fact, that is not going to, and this is no new news, going to suit this generation for financial reasons. Because companies can't keep increasing wages. The graduates themselves cannot afford to live near where they work, even though they'd love to. So therefore, it's just not going to work for practical reasons. The cost of living, so money matters. A lot of the time, you guys will know, working with graduate employers, they do not stay at the salary, which really annoys me. So, when it's a graduate program, it's a standard salary. It doesn't matter if you have a base degree, an honours degree, a PhD, it tends to be majority, broad brush, a standard base salary. So every employer should be stating that salary. They shouldn't be wasting candidates' time or their own time talking to people who are ultimately not going to accept a job because of money. Now, pre-COVID research that we would have done internally in Irish Distillers and also in the marketplace told us that, graduates, while money mattered, it was actually the training and development that mattered, the culture of the business. Did the business align with their values? And all that was lovely. But that's not the reality now. What's the money? What's the benefits? How often can I work from home so I don't have to rent and pay huge money in rent? That's what they want to know. And money talks. And that's where retention issues are coming up, because if at that young age, if you can get more money someplace else, yes, after 2 months with one employer, you're going to jump ship and get headhunted by another because of money. And that's just the reality. And that's where we talk about a wider set of EVP, of this employee value proposition piece coming up. And then, of course, the geopolitical unrest. When they come into an employer or they come into a college campus, they want stability and they want safety. And that's because of the context of what's happening geopolitically out there. So a lot going on, and all of that is then underlined by technological transformation, which they're not afraid of, but their employers are. So they go into the world of work, and the world of work does not marry what they expect it to, because sometimes the technological advances that we're used to in work are behind where the students expect it to be. So a lot happening for these guys, bless them. And I didn't even talk about the areas in blue that were in the last slide, but it been near Halloween, I put up the scary face there. So it's basically very scary. So I'm not surprised that you had some lovely, funny faces, scary faces in the chat when I asked how are students feeling about the jobs market. They are feeling very scared, very frightened, and it's up to yourselves to be that first line of defence in helping them understand the context of the jobs market. But then it's up to employers to try and understand their context when they attract, hire, and try to retain them. So it's crazy to think this statistic. I remember pulling this out. God, well, I think I did a presentation 2019 about Gen Z when people were still thinking about millennials and thinking, oh, these Gen Z people, we don't even need to think about them yet. And I remember saying, you know, that Gen Z will account for 27% of the workforce by 2025. Now, that statistic was again brought up in 2022 by the World Economic Forum, where I took this most recent one. So they said back in 2019, it was like a quarter of the workplace. But now the World Economic Forum have confirmed it will be 27%. That's next year. So next year, 1 in 4 people, just over 1 in 4 people in the workplace will be Gen Z. Okay, so that brings us to talk about this label, because the context of change is about how we bucket people as well. Okay, now I'll be honest and say I'm a fan of buckets. I don't like myself personally to be put in a bucket, but when it comes to research and understanding how to attract, retain, and train talent, buckets are helpful. Okay, so you know, some of you would have come up at the Grad Ireland session during the summer and said, well, you know, are people using the term Gen Z anymore? Are people using Centennial anymore? And actually this came from, because I researched it then, I was like, and I was talking to some academics and they were like, oh, we don't talk about millennials, Centennials, Generation Alpha, which are the next generation coming. We don't talk about that anymore. That's not the phraseology we use. And I'm like, well, what phrases do you use? Like, you know, we have to have some bucketing so that we understand the nuances of the different age groups in the workplace and in society more broadly. So basically it came from research that the Pew Research Center in the US, which is very reputable, of course, did in 2023. And they wanted to limit the stereotyping of generations by removing labels. So if you read their research, and I do have a link to it in this deck, because it is very interesting to read, sometimes we hear that labels have been removed, but we don't know where it came from. So this is where it came from. And what they're suggesting doing instead of using labels like Gen X, Y, Z, and Gen Alpha is just talking about them in decades. Now, in my head, there's no difference. I prefer to call them Gen Z than the decade in which they were born. So look, this is just where it came from, because I know it's actually a hot topic at the moment. Do we even call them or label them as Gen Z? But I like it. So when we look at the context of this generation, we basically have, if we look here at Olivia is 12, okay? So she's the youngest in this generation. She hasn't hit you guys in college yet. She's just finishing primary school. So she'll join the workforce in 2030. And Olivia and all of her colleagues in 2030 will be the last of this generation to join the workplace. And then you'll be hit by Generation Alpha. This is coming really quick. So next year, Olivia will start secondary school. And she'll be hitting college campuses very soon. And of course, the workplace then for internships, work placement, etc. Then you look at Tom, and Tom is the person coming into you after this meeting, maybe today after lunch. He's 18, he just started college this year, and he's going to graduate in 27, 28 to start a graduate program, but we'll hit the workplace before that because he'll be doing an internship and hopefully a work placement. And he'll mostly have Gen Zs as his managers. So he'll be learning from his own generation. He won't even have a different generation as a manager, typically. Then if you come down to Jacob, Jacob is 23, he's just finished college. Or just finishing college, depending on his situation. And he will join the workplace. It will be hybrid, remote, flexible working, and he'll probably have managers who are peer managers, Gen Z. But then the eldest Gen Zer, and I think companies are not, well, I was going to say not really understanding this. I know for a fact they're not understanding because I'm working with them on it. So Emily is the eldest Gen Zer. She's 27. She's graduated, she's done her graduate program. She's probably finished it now. She's done her offboarding and she is now a manager. And she's the person managing Jacob. She's probably the person who's going to be managing Tom when he comes in for his internship and his work placement. So the point of this is organizations are ignoring from what I'm seeing, they're ignoring labels like Gen Z because they're ignoring the fact that, again, they have to change for this new generation. And it's becoming too late already because this generation are already managing their own generation. And this is becoming a huge problem in the workplace. Because as Gen Z move up into junior management, then into senior and middle management, etc., the problems that they've come in the door with in day one on graduate programs have not been addressed. And they're multiplying as they move up through the organization, and they are not being addressed. Of course, the next context of work is this is what it looked like for all of us. Good crack in the office pre-COVID, good banter. Crazy to think that there was still office phones going off, and people chatting. There was never enough desk space. Sometimes your desk was getting smaller and smaller. And of course, there was a lot of collaboration in meetings, a lot of long meetings that probably weren't necessary at times as well. But there was collaboration. There was, time with people. This is now what the world of work looks like if you have a nice home. We know that some students are dialing in from their cars, dialing in from trains and buses because they're commuting, whatever the reality is. But in a lovely world where you can afford it, this is now what your office looks like, which is bottom left. Or this is how you're doing this is how you're doing meetings. In a coffee shop, I was stranded in the UK there because of the storm at the weekend, and I had to do calls like this in a hotel lobby. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know how people work like this, how they put on I hate wearing headphones and all that and talking in public, even though there wasn't really anyone around me, obviously. But this is their reality now. So the world of work has changed. And we just talked about the pandemic and the isolation and completing, let's say, your degree, your leaving cert, your junior cert, whatever it was, in your bedroom alone. Work now has become isolating because people are not in these upper situations, sitting beside people at work. For me, when I walk into offices now, it's so sad. They feel like libraries. I'm afraid to talk in them. And when I talk to students, they're the same. They don't want to have a call at their desk. So everything is changing in the world of work. And this is not new, but the isolation piece is the bit that people are forgetting about. And that's leading to the concerns and the worries of students. So employers need to get the balance right between office and work. And actually, in our research this summer, I was shocked because I never heard of this before. In some sectors, and you guys are probably aware of this, it might not be new news for you, but it was new news for me. In some sectors, they're expecting their graduates to go in 4 days a week, while other employees go in 2 or 3 days a week. And the graduates are saying, great, if my manager is there for me to learn from and talk to, but they're not. So why am I in the office and I'm only learning from other graduates? I'm not learning from anyone else. There are no role models there that I can learn from. So it's creating this frustration, disparity, unfairness in the workplace that is just going to fester. So the last context of change is, of course, tech. And we were chatting about this. Now, I'm old enough to remember doing assignments in college on a typewriter, right? I remember getting my first email in college. It was Trinity at the time. I got this piece of paper and they were like, oh, this is how you log into the computer. And we had to go to a computer lab because we had no phones that were tech savvy enough back then for that. And the computer looked like this. It actually looked like that, which is a bit scary. My first phone looked like this, my first Nokia. I can still feel how heavy it was. And then, of course, I remember Googling for the first time thinking this will make assignments easier, but it kind of didn't. So anyways, that was 80s, 90s evolution that I'm presuming all of us on the call grew up with. So we grew up with all of this. And this is the technology that we had to get used to, and we had to learn. But in actual fact, the tech these guys are getting used to is, Siri on our phone. Not a lot of us might use Siri, but that's on our phones, a device that we have in our pockets and we can use all of the time. Of course, Alexa, I have a 2-year-old niece and she tells Alexa, stop, So she talks to Alexa sometimes more than me. Alexa, tell us a joke. That'd be now my 4-year-old niece, not the 2-year-old saying that. Tell us a joke, as opposed to Auntie Sinead, tell me a joke. So Alexa is like her auntie, her mother, her carer, so it's part of the home. Of course, ChatGPT has become part of all of our lives. I am presuming all of us on this call have tried it. I had not tried it. At the Grad Ireland breakfast in the summer, I was actually ignoring ChatGPT. I was like, I don't want to look at AI. I think I said to someone, I want to go and have chickens in the west of Ireland. I don't want to, engage with this whole AI thing. But look, it's not scary once you start to use it. It's actually quite brilliant. But there are, of course, learning curves. And last week, or was it the week before now, Tesla, of course, introduced us to Optimus. So, my grandnieces won't be talking to Alexa. They'll be talking to Optimus, which is crazy to think. So this is the world of, change that we're living in. So while for us, it was getting used to this technology, for this generation, it's getting used to Optimus and ChatGPT. So their use of technology, yes, but the technology, we say change is coming. Change is not coming anymore. Change just landed last week with Optimus. And earlier this year with ChatGPT, etc. So change is absolutely here, and I'm not seeing, and I'd love to know more, but we don't have time today, but we will get to meet at different events, I'm sure. I'd love to know from yourselves, are you seeing that employers are in line with this change? I don't, they're not. So what's happening is there's a new generation, there's new ways of working which people never sorted out, and there's new technology, and companies are crying out for help. So if companies are crying out for help, then I totally understand why you had those frustrated faces, sad faces, and thumbs down at the start of this talk. Students are afraid. They don't know what's going on. They're not afraid of technology. They're afraid of how employers are dealing with the change. So look, in the interest of time, I won't go through all of the research here from HireVue, but I have the link in the appendix of this deck. And when we look globally at the US, UK, Australia, so HireVue take this a state of the global early careers hiring, and they look to the future as well. But some interesting things they can see is that more than 3/4 of US employers rate the job market for the class of 24 from good to excellent. But you've just told me, and I've just told you from my research, students are not seeing that. They're worried. In Australia, 30% of Australian employers stated they felt examination results were very important or quite important. That's down now, that's down from 38. So they're not. We're seeing employers, and I saw this a lot in the research, that the level of your degree, especially when we look at like sectors like law and finance and consulting, etc., they really still were focused on the level of degree, and they wanted the top people in the class. That mindset is changing, and we see that in the research reflected here from HireVue from an Australian lens. And then we see 45% of respondents expect that most of their recruitment will be conducted fully online in the next 5 years. That's fine, but we all know from research as well that how you assess people online versus how you assess them in reality is different. And the results are different in terms of the retention that you get from hiring in person versus online. It's higher, the retention, when you actually hire people in person. So hybrid models are the best model, where of course you do that filtering in an online perspective, but then you do your hiring in an in-person perspective. And 54% of UK employers expect to move to a recruitment approach that focuses on evaluating candidate skills. So again, you've been to enough talks, I'm sure, about the skills first agenda, but absolutely skills are what student employers are looking for, not another master's degree. Get out there and get real world experience is what they're looking for. So a few weeks ago, you may have seen I contributed to a piece in the Irish Times around Gen Z whispers, this new term that came out of the US from a company called Edelman. And we're seeing a lot of companies, and actually it was interesting working with Irish companies this summer and the research with them. I'm seeing a lot of companies setting up, youth boards, Gen Z forums. Edelman, who came up with the term Gen Z whisperer, actually have their own youth lab, and they have a ZEO, which I love. So for Future Roots, I definitely want to have a job for someone as a ZEO. I can't be it because I'm not Gen Z. So I'm looking for a ZEO maybe next year when the company expands. But other contributors to that piece were Claire, and I've worked with Claire for a number of years. She works in Youth Lab. And one of the key points that she made was that what employers are looking for from the next generation, they're really looking for their thinking, their savviness, their openness. And when I talk to students, and when we did the research with students and graduates, that's what they think are their USP for employers. you know, how they think, how they are so tuned into technology, not afraid of technology, etc. So they see that as a USP. So there is an alignment there. And then, of course, Mark, if you're not following Mark or Claire on LinkedIn, I'd highly recommend you do. Employers have to highlight opportunities for growth learning, and rather than the actual roles itself. So, you know, job descriptions are changing as well, and what candidates look for and what employers communicate to candidates is changing, because actually candidates now, they want that growth and that learning. Again, it's not new news, but employers are not listening to this and not doing this. So what does the future look like? Well, basically, you all said it yourselves, retention is the problem. And it's not just, oh, they finished a 2-year program and now we can't retain them. It's actually, they're just in the door 3 months. I've spent a lot of money as an employer trying to get them in the door, and now they're leaving because they've been poached by another employer. So 37% of graduate employers have difficulty, are worried about retaining talent after the graduate program. But the employers we spoke to over the summer, that's not their concern. Their concern is that they'll be poached when they're finished in onboarding them. So this is from our own research. 25% of students would like to move abroad once they complete their graduate program. So I have that in to marry with the retention piece, because what we actually saw in Ireland, and our research was just domestic research over the summer, we saw that employers are being really innovative in this space. So some employers are giving graduates a year's sabbatical after the graduate program to go travel, or up to a year. So between 3 months to a year, because not all graduates want a year. They just want 3 months to go and travel, learn, work in another country. Sometimes they just want to work in an office in another country, and employers are now allowing that. So there's a lot of really open-mindedness in Ireland around this at the moment. Employers are prioritizing transferable skills. So it's not about, and I know this is, you know, impacts yourselves in universities because obviously you run master's programs, but employers are saying, I don't want a master's. I want them to come into me and know how to communicate, how to present, how to have critical thinking, how to have commercial acumen. And they're not going to know that unless they have gotten work experience. But the graduates are saying, but we have work experience, we've run our own companies. And that's not been recognised. They only recognise it if we actually work for another employer. So there's a mismatch there as well that's happening, and a frustration point. And a huge thing that will be the future of graduate recruitment is measurement. So you would think that return on investment and ROI is a big thing in the graduate space, but it actually is not robust enough. So this is this percentage is from feedback from Aon and HPC. They do an annual report now on early careers, and this is a statistic from their report. And this is definitely something that's changing in the graduate space. If it's not measurable, then the money won't be there to support it. So that means that aligning on strategic approach to early talent with careful planning, stakeholder alignment, and clear vision for outcomes is really important. And that's a quote by myself. So look, when I talk to employers, this is the first slide I show them, because sometimes people I speak to have been tasked with revising or setting up a graduate offering or an early careers offering more broadly, and they have to do it really quickly, and they aren't doing these things. They are not aligning stakeholders. They don't have a clear vision, and they don't have a clear strategic plan. The students and graduates are then coming in, and they're seeing that, they're being turned off, and it's leading to lower retention. And that's just the facts of the matter. It's the practicalities of it. So for any of you who don't know me, there's a little bit there about me. I see some of you have already connected with me on LinkedIn. Thanks a mil. So I'm down here at S. Darcy or at Future Roots. There are the connection, or the reports I've referred to today. They're very good reads. They're not long reads. So if you're interested in some of the insights from today, they're all there for you. And that's it. I'd invite you to stay connected. So Angela, I'll let you see if there's any questions there before we wrap up.
Yeah, oh my goodness, Sinead, I'm filled with excitement and nervousness after your presentation there. But even the last slide you had, I remember being at a presentation the students gave after coming back from work placement. And I just said to him, you know, regardless of the technical skills and that you learned, and he's just said, and you mentioned it there, the phone ringing in the office. He said, we don't have a phone at home. The phone is beside me, and it was ringing, and he kept on thinking, well, it's not for me. Nobody knows me. And this guy then was throwing one of those, you know, stress balls at him, thinking, are you going to answer the phone? You're the nearest person. He said, I just didn't know what I would say if I answered the phone, you know. And, you know, I think
And they don't know.
They
don't know
don't
what to
know.
wear to the office. They don't know what
Yeah.
to say if the phone rings. They don't know how to reply to emails. There's just so many skills that they're worried about.
So worried about it. And, you know, I have a lovely girl on work experience at the moment, and I asked for something. She emailed in literally just the content. There was a no hello, there was no greetings in it. It was just trying to actually just explain it to her, you know. So yeah, it's interesting times ahead, but absolutely great feedback here. Sinead, thank you. Very informative and very much appreciated. Fantastic presentation. You know, I'm hearing a lot about the employers and graduates lacking basic IT skills, struggling with a simple MS, office tasks, troubleshooting. Did this come up in your research?
It did.
Tim
I
was,
love that.
asking,
It
yeah.
actually did. So, Tim, students are crying out. They're saying, employers think I have these skills and I don't. So I just need, if we think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and those base needs, you know, one of the base needs is teach me about Microsoft Suite. You know, I actually don't know what you think I know. And I would know that myself with working with students over the years. I would have presumed that they knew how to use Excel or PowerPoint because we worked in marketing. PowerPoint was very prevalent. And they were like, I just don't. Can you teach me? Now, the one thing they do know, and I asked them to teach me about, is Canva. They know a lot about Canva, but a lot of employers are not using that unless it's for social content creation. Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Sinead? In Marie Lacka here in the University of Galway, like employers are saying they're finding it difficult to recruit and retention, and maybe I missed the start of the presentation, but the international students are an untapped talent pipeline, and from what I can see in my experience, employers are just putting roadblocks in their way in terms of I see programs now going to 3.5 years, and you must have a visa that allows you to work for 3.5 years. There we have some of the big four insisting that they have cap 1 and 2 entitlement. That you know, obviously they're only then interested in a certain cohort. And I suppose from as a previous employer, and you know, what insights can you offer in terms of that hesitancy from employers? Because you know, we spoke with IBEC during the year that said there were 65,000 professional skills jobs on this vacant in Ireland at the moment, and yet we have this whole cohort of students that are coming with, you know, and are qualified, but yet employers are not open to hiring them. And are we missing something? That you talked about, that alignment of stakeholders. Are we missing something that we're, you know, one of the things we've done here, and we've shared, is that we did a whole FAQ. We put all the information from all the websites, that the government websites about visas. So we have a very comprehensive FAQ document done that we sent to Enterprise Ireland, we sent to IBEC and so on, to inform employers where they say, well, we don't have this information. Well, now we've done it for you and we've provided it. But I suppose it's just a constant struggle. And yet these students are an answer to some of the talent pipeline shortfalls that they have, but they're not willing to hire them. And I'm just wondering, have you insights that, you know, gold nuggets that we could use that might help us in understanding the employer's perspective around that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parts to that question. So thanks for asking. I see in the chat people are saying it's very relevant to where their mindset's at as well. So the first thing is, you know, the job that you guys do is very important in terms of people that walk in the door to you, your students, in helping them understand, especially those who require a visa. First of all, at its foundational level, the employers that are open to employing people who have the particular type of visa that they have, okay? Because some employers are not going to be, and that's the employer's choice, okay?
Yeah,
so the first thing I say to students that I work with who are international students like that, having trouble with visas, you know, they need to understand the employers that are open to hiring them, because they're very frustrated thinking, oh, I can't get a job, I'm not getting interviews, or I'm getting interviews, but I'm not getting the job because of my visa. It's like, first of all, who are the employers that you know will hire you? Do not apply to the people who do not. And that seems very harsh, but it's a reality, okay? Because employers have visa restrictions on, like, for example, we hired somebody in Irish Distillers last year who was going to Spain, and that person was from Northern Ireland. We could not, for the life of us, get that person to Spain. Okay, so employers are learning because they're, you know, they're familiar with the visa processes and what their markets and their jobs need, and they understand where something's possible and something's just not. And when it's not possible, it's not fair to the candidate. So it's better that the employer is open. So the first thing is on the visa piece, you know, who are the employers? You guys can help them understand, students understand, who are the employers you should be targeting because they are open to this. Visa is not going to be an issue. And who are the ones, please don't waste your time. It's just not going to work for practical reasons. Okay, so that's the first thing, because that can be very frustrating for students. Then the next thing is, I'm talking to a lot of students and they're getting advice from career coaches, not yourselves now, but actual people they pay, saying kind of like the fake it till you make it thing. And that's not what this generation are about. If they can't be their true authentic selves, they actually don't want the job. So they're getting bad advice from some place, which is around how they get the job that is not a fit for their skills, their values, their attitude and aptitude, and of course their future career goals that they have. And if they don't join a company that suits that long-term career goal, then it's going to impact retention because they're not going to stay and not going to be happy and productive and engaged when they do stay. So somewhere, these students who are afraid, a lot of them may not even be coming to you as a free resource. They're actually paying other people for advice, and that advice is not getting them the jobs that they need. So again, any students I speak to, I always say, talk to your careers officer. You know, go to them. They're the people you should be speaking to. They know more about all the employers than I do. They know more all about the landscape than I do. They're the people you should be plugging into. So I always push them towards yourselves. And then the last thing I'll say is, and I'm conscious of time, is employers. Like I said, employers are squeezed. They do not have the resource to think about making a process more streamlined, etc. And that's where I'm coming in and helping them to have that headspace, have that strategic approach, that external lens on how do you make this simpler? So you have a need, you can't fill this role. There are lots of students out there, like you said, with the skills that they need. How do you help that jigsaw match and be made quicker? Because sometimes employers, and this is why they feel their system is broken, and that's where they're coming to me looking for help, is that they've actually been so innovative, they've made the process super long, and the person who made that process so long is gone, and they don't remember why they were so long in the first place.
Yeah. No, so, and they're great suggestions, and I think we do give that advice to our students in terms of, you know, here are the ones that are open. But we have actually had employers say, I'm not hiring an international student because my demographic of my clients are Irish domestic, you know, and they wouldn't like to see someone, an international person dealing with them. And that has been said back to us. And I understand employers, you know, there are those who are very good and very supportive. But the government here is pushing universities to do an internationalization strategy to fund the universities. But what you have then, we have the Department of Justice who are increasing the ceilings for the visa to, you know, in terms of the permit to transition from 1G to 44,000. And you have the Department of Trade and Enterprise who weren't aware that that ceiling went up. And so we're caught in the middle of all of that. And if the government are making universities push their internationalization strategy, then there has to be something to help us with those employers who are hard no to try and influence and lobby them and the benefits that these students bring in terms of that talent pipeline. And I suppose,
and you know what,
it's very frustrating when you see students in debt to 40,000 to come here, and we have a duty of care, and no, it's very frustrating. The system is against them the whole time.
Yeah, and I agree, and I completely hear the frustration, and it's echoed there in the chat as well.
Yeah.
But I remember UCD careers pre-COVID, there was a change in some of the regulations that you'd mentioned there at that time, and they actually had a call, or they led a call at the time with employers to inform them of it. So I don't know if there's an opportunity for you guys to like literally have something like that again, where you're educating employers, because employers don't know sometimes about these changes, and that's where you can really partner with employers to help educate them as well. But I do remember that one time, it was David at the time in UCD and organised this call, and it was so helpful because we didn't actually know about the change in regulation. So something like that could help. But anyways, it's a bigger problem than one call.
And partner with Enterprise Ireland with that. And we tried to do it with and now I'll finish after this, with AHECS. And IBEC basically told us, oh, we won't be telling we won't be advocating our members to hire in that because we don't tell our members what to do. So that was the sort of reaction. But yeah, it's the ubiquitous sort of thorn in everyone's side at the moment, and particularly the students themselves, where we feel we just have a duty of care, and we're trying to come up with innovative ways to help and support employers to see and recognise their talent. But it is very challenging. So I don't want to hog all the questions, but that was just to try and get your insights on that.
No, and I think, Marie, as you see in some of the chat there, Sinead, as well, that it is saying what people are feeling. But maybe there's just one last thing. I know Orla had mentioned there about employers using standard psychometric testing if recruiters are looking at transferable skills, if they're hiring for transferable skills, will they lose a student who might be a really good employee?
Of course they could, yeah. So, you know, it's a real period of change out there at the moment. There's a real appetite amongst employers for change in the graduate space and how they attract, recruit, select, you know, train, retain talent. So psychometrics have always been a staple of the early careers space. I believe in the strength of, you know, psychometrics, and I would have spoken at the biennial about the insights and the research that we would have done over 10 years around the use of psychometrics. But yeah, there's just a bit of a grey area at the moment in terms of psychometrics don't seem to be answering the questions employers really want to know the answers to. Competencies and skills, competency-based interviews are not answering them. So this skills first piece, people are trying to grapple with at the moment, and the terminology around it isn't clear enough right now. Like, I've been at a lot of talks around skills first. I'm sure some of you guys have too. So there's just this kind of a grey area emerging between the psychometrics, the competencies, and what employers really want to ask for now, if that makes sense.
Well, Sinead, thanks a million. I said there's some lovely comments and excellent presentation as always from you. So really thank you. Wish you all the very best of luck. And if there's anything AHECS can do to support you in your new position, feel free to reach out to us. So thanks to the members for joining. Again, thanks to Orla, or thanks to Caroline for coordinating and planning it all. And last but not least, Sinead, to yourself. So thanks, everybody. We're looking forward to seeing you in the next one.
Sinead, can I just ask you a quick question?
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
In your
Well done,
your
Sinead.
business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll wait now. Do you advise employers about setting up graduate programs and how to set up a graduate program?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I had an employer reach out to me who's looking for that support. So I might connect you with them if that's okay. They are based in Galway, all right, but they have offices all around, and I think it would be good. I just see they're defining your early strategy. So if that's okay with you, I might connect them with you to help that.
Yeah, and I'm Galway based myself, so yeah.
Oh, brilliant, yeah. So that's even better. So they're reaching out to me, and I'll give them your name, Sinead, in terms of they want to do build a large graduate program to help ramp up, and they really wanted to do a year-long program, and they have nothing in place at the moment, and they realise that for future sort of succession planning, they need to start bringing in large tranches of graduates into their organisation. So it's okay for you. I'll give them your name. That's all right.
No problem at all. No problem.
Thanks a million, and thanks for
your contribution.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And thanks, Angela.
Thanks again.
And Caroline.
No, thank you, Sinead. I really appreciate that. So appreciate that. And thanks to Caroline as well. And look, again, as we said, if there's anything we can do to support you, feel free to ask us.
And I'm always here if you need anything.
If you just want to drop me on, if you're happy to share the slides and that, just send them on, and I can share them, and I'll get the recording up on YouTube, and I'll put the link back into the chat.
Yeah, that's great, Caroline. Thanks so much,
Thanks
guys.
a million. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sinead.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Caroline. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Angela.
Bye-bye.